Shah from the podcast Thrive and Not Survive with another episode. In this podcast, yesterday we talked about the four levels. Well, actually, it's not the four levels, that's all I want to say, but I want to say you have to maybe accept first before you can, are looking for some change. Often we say, hey, if you change this and that, then I would accept that. Or I would, even worse, then I would accept you. If you are slightly different, or if you become this, then I will accept you. And I did a podcast yesterday in Instagram Live, where actually it's probably, maybe you should think about it, that you do it the other way around. Maybe you should accept someone first for who that person is at that moment, and then maybe it will change. And actually, I think you can use that in way more things as well. So let me give you an example. What I do when I coach people, sometimes if you have some bodily pains, you have to get a little bit there and accept first where you are in that pain, where that pain is, before you actually start to look for healing or getting away from that pain. So maybe if you have a lot of headaches, maybe if you accept it first or take some rest, it's better than immediately trying to change it by popping up all kind of pills in you, right? And no, I'm not at all against medicine or stuff like that. But if you think about it, our body is pretty natural, and nowadays it has become, very normal to pop in immediately a couple of pills and immediately try to change before we accept what's going on. See, that's another example of how that works, right? But in personal relationship, if you meet someone, sometimes we look too much at some person's history and not how a person is today. So we don't accept what that person was in the past to accept them as the person he or she is today. Right? Same thing with the economical status. Is it easier for you to accept a person who is poor in your life, or can you only accept a person in your life if he or she has some sort of economical status? If you meet someone from whom you know is very healthy, are you more likely to treat that person slightly different? So that's what we talked about yesterday. Another thing we often have is, if you already know the public opinion about a certain person, can you guarantee that that would not influence you by either accepting or not accepting that other person in your life? And you cannot help it. We're all human beings, so that quickly help. But we should not always listen to what other people say about another person. You should make up your own mind, right? So that's what I mean with accept it first before you expect any change. And last but not least, and that's where I want to add something today, we also talked often about, hey, if someone made a certain performance, they had maybe a world title, or, a certain kind of, level of performance in the company, then we tend to treat that person slightly different, and maybe not for what it is, but maybe for what the title of that person is, right? We need to think about these things. What I also didn't do yesterday on purpose a little bit, because it's also an Instagram Live, I made less a connection of how that relates to a child abuse victim, right? So for the child abuse victims, they have a harder time to deal with these things, because their trust in other people is often very violated, right? So they often look, and it's very hard for people, for abuse victims, to accept people for what they are. They're very suspicious, and I can only relate to myself. For the longest time, I had a harder time to relate stronger with men, for instance, because it were men who violated, me when I was younger. So I didn't even know it. It was kind of subconscious, but over time I started to see that I started to learn I needed to learn how to trust men again in life, right? Not all men, after all, are bad. So, here's the same thing. I had to accept the fact that I was dealing harder with building up trust with other people before I could move on to that. Instead of just saying, I'm okay, I'm doing good by myself, I don't need anyone, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I want to give another layer to it. I actually was already planning doing that, and I must honestly admit I both forgot and I ran a little bit out of time, which is not very uncommon for me because I always think that I have so much to tell you guys, right? And we also could look at, if it comes to accepting people, is what we see in the other people, what the other person potentially could become. And the easiest way to relate to that is if you think about your students, right? I'm a teacher, I'm a coach and a teacher, and often I see more in a student than they see themselves, specifically if they deal with confidence issues. That happens a lot in coaching situations where people dealing with confidence issues, making the link again here to abuse victims, they deal a lot with confidence issues. So if you are on the other side and you can help the other person to accept and see in them what they could become and let them see then actually they could become that. Does that make sense? Right? And as a dance teacher, I have actually the same thing. Often I see in a student way more than what they see in themselves, and that's often caused because of confidence issues. That could be, they had a bad experience with previous teachers. It could be in their upbringing. It could be for many things. It could even be cultural, right? So, give you an example. I have an Asian background, and in a lot of Asian cultures, we're not so extroverted. We're very introverted. So we're kind of crazy, in a small family circle, but we're not so extroverted. Maybe from nature, but not from a cultural perspective. So it as a teacher, you can help if you want to go into dances, which is after all performance art. You have to help people to get over that. And my teacher saw in me that I actually have a performer in me. Although in the beginning I was very shy, I also recognized that sometimes with my siblings when they were young and they were pursued something in performance, strange as it is, but at the same time they were hit by the shyness and didn't dare to show themselves so much. Now, here again, this you would definitely need also with among child abuse victims. Sometimes very hard for them to show who they truly are because they are a little bit afraid of that. Does that make sense? So, if we go, and this is all under the title, how can we love better, right? And that might be a weird title, and maybe I come back to that as well, because I do think that in all the things that we learn in life, we learn how to do mathematics, we learn about history, we learn about languages, I'm talking here about school, but we don't have a subject that teaches how to learn how to love. And I'm not talking about the romantic kind of love. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not the all-encompassing word of love. Love is way more, right? We don't do that. At best, sometimes we talk how to deal better with relationships. But if we start to build fundamentally into the people that we have an opportunity to guide and maybe sometimes to mentor, in other cases to teach, or if you have kids and you are responsible for their upbringing, how much time do we actually spend on teaching how to love someone, right? How do we do that, right? So typically we say, you need to give good examples. Well, that is definitely true, right? There is nothing better than to lead by example, of course. But there are definitely concrete things that you can talk about, right? With your child, with your students, with your coachee, with the people that you mentor, so your mentee, about how to love other people, right? Often that is a topic that is taught from stage, in churches, in big coaching conferences. It might have a slightly different title, right? But not enough if you think about it. If you see what's going on and what's wrong in the world, that is actually, we kind of really clumsy nowadays in how to love other people. And if you see what Hollywood does to this, is we only have this, you know, idea that is all about romance, which is great. I mean, I definitely like chick flicks myself, so I like romantic movements, which is a big part of love. But I'm talking about loving your neighbor, I'm talking about loving your siblings, I'm talking about, overcoming things when things don't go well. So here, automatically, the things that I talked about yesterday come back immediately. But here, specifically, we could do that as a collective, and we could do that as an individual, right? Are we looking for the potential in people? And are we only judging them for what we just see on the surface, or are we judging them of what they have established so far? Are we judging them of the history that we have? Can we also look at them and see what the potential is that they have in them? And strangely enough, and I know this from experience, when you address people like that, and specifically that's a formal setting, I totally immediately admit, if someone comes to me, we agree that I coach that person, so that means I'm the coach and the other one is the coachee, right? I constantly look for what the potential is of that person. I combine that, of course, with what that person wants from life, her or himself. But it often, if someone specifically with child abuse people, they often, are okay to just survive in life and not thrive. And you help people to thrive in life by looking at what their potential is, what you think they're capable of, right? And you see that with children too. We often do that as parents. Hopefully you do that as a parent, by the way, is that you stimulate people, to your children, to do more that they often think they are capable of themselves. You don't say, and maybe that was a little bit an old-fashioned way of thinking, when you grew up in a blue-collar family, they say, hey, you were born blue-collar, you will never be white-collar, right? For a lot of generations, people in the younger generation, they don't even know what I mean with that. But if you're from a little bit older generation, you definitely know what I mean with that. And it was a pretty common saying, right? Hey, you're just from a simple family, and it's okay. You stay always simply. They didn't want us to aspire more because that was not done. Nowadays, we talk a little bit about it more, and it's not always about more in life and more achieving and stuff like that. It's about positive and learning to learn other people how to love as well, right? Wouldn't that be a great responsibility to take on? We don't talk about and think about that so much. But hey, I'm talking here for child abuse victims, and the one thing they truly need is real, sincere love from other people, right? I'm not talking about romance love. They need to build up trust again. So that's where we can help those people. With the numbers that are going around, about any woman you talk to probably has dealt with something like that. So if you talk about, these things, that's an easy one, right? It's an easy one. I hope you agree with me on this topic. So that's what I wanted to edit on the discussion of yesterday, is can we see the potential in other people and help them to see that too, right? Just by positive conversation and by accepting them in that way. Right, and don't be disturbed by their history, what their economical level is, what other people say about them or what they performed so far, either in low end or on the right end. And can we just do that, right? I'm not saying that I am really good at that. I have my issues obviously as well, but it's just the intention. If you have the intention that we maybe create through this podcast already, that's a pretty good thing already. I hope you agree with that, right? Anyhow, that was my message for today. A little bit a continuation of the podcast of yesterday. I hope to hear back tomorrow. This was Sjaal from the podcast Thrive, Not Survive After Child Abuse. And I'll hear back tomorrow. Okay, bye-bye.